The most desperate rescue of the Afghanistan war wasn't ordered by generals. It began with a single, forbidden phone call on a silent holy night, placing a lone soldier 8,000 miles from home in an impossible bind. Obey direct commands to stand down, or trust the dying voice of a stranger, and risk a court-martial to save 11 men he had never met. The snowy silence of Christmas Eve at Fort Bragg was absolute. Inside a dimly lit barracks room, Sergeant First Class Michael Carter stared at the secure phone on his desk, his conscience a battlefield. For hours, he had been the unwilling anchor of a desperate, crackling satellite relay from a mountain ridge in Nuristan. 11 SEALs from Echo Team were trapped, surrounded by a relentless Taliban force. Their ammunition was almost gone, their medic was dead, and their comms were failing. The last official word from command, 3 hours ago, was a grim freeze. A severe blizzard had grounded all assets. A daylight extraction was being evaluated. But Carter, a communications specialist with 15 years of experience, knew the code. In the dead of an Afghan winter, daylight would be a death sentence for the men on that ridge. The relay was his secret to keep. He had been monitoring a barely used frequency, a ghost channel from an old joint op, when the broken transmission first hissed to life. The voice was that of Senior Chief Declan Walsh, his words clipped by pain and static. Any station, this is Echo. Surrounded, casualties need immediate evac. Against protocol, Carter had responded, establishing a fragile link. For 2 hours, he was their only tether to the world, charting their position, listening as the firefights grew closer, hearing the low curses of men preparing for a final stand. Then, 30 minutes ago, the final transmission, Carter, they're breaching the perimeter. If you can hear this, tell our families. The gunfire that followed was deafening, even over the tinny speaker. Then silence. A different kind of order had come from his own command later. Stand down, power down the non-standard equipment, and log off. The mission was considered catastrophic. Assets were being retasked. Carter had powered down the main console, but he had not disconnected the hidden, jury-rigged backup line. He sat now, head in his hands, the image of his own brother, killed in Fallujah, superimposing over the faces of the 11 strangers dying in the snow. The military machine, vast and logical, had written them off. He was just a cog in that machine. But the human voice in that static, the raw sound of courage facing its end, had gotten under his skin. He looked at the family photo on his desk, then at the secure phone. To use it for an unauthorized purpose was career suicide. He picked up the handset. His call wouldn't go to a general. It rang in the cluttered Texas workshop of Javier Ravi Gonzalez, a retired Air Force PJ and civilian helicopter pilot, currently working on his old Huey. Carter's words were simple. Ravi, I need a miracle. And you can't say no. 8,000 miles away, in the pre-dawn chill of a private airfield in Tajikistan, Ravi Gonzalez tightened the last bolt on the engine cowling of his battered, unmarked Mi-8 helicopter. The bird was old Soviet surplus, painted a flaky civilian white, but its engines sang true. Beside him, 2 other retired Special Forces buddies, a Dane named Soren and a Brit called Doc Hollis, checked their personal weapons and loaded medical kits. They had come because Carter had called, and because of the 3 words he'd used, they're not gone. Ravi had mortgaged his business for fuel and bribes. There would be no search and rescue cover, no fighter jet support, no extraction plan. They had a grid coordinate, a fading hope, and a storm to fly into. Back at Bragg, Carter's world was collapsing. His unauthorized activity had triggered a firewall alert. His commanding officer, Major Brennan, was at the door, his face a mask of cold fury. Sergeant Carter, you are relieved. You contacted a civilian asset about a classified, terminated operation. Explain yourself. Carter stood, not at attention, but with a weary defiance. The operation, sir, is 11 living men. The satellite feed went silent, but the biometric tracker from their vests are still pinging. Weak but alive. They're holding on. He slid a data pad across the desk, showing 11 faint, flickering signals clustered on a map. Brennan barely glanced at it. Those signals are likely compromised or residual. The decision has been made. You are in violation of a uniform code of military justice. Security, take him a holding. As the MPs approached, Carter made one last move. He tapped a key on his hidden laptop, sending the full data packet, coordinates, biometric feeds, comm logs, not to command, but to an encrypted server Ravi could access. The link died as they took him away. The Mi-8 hammered through the blizzard, buffeted by winds that threatened to spin the heavy machine into the jagged rocks of the Hindu Kush. Ice crusted the windshield. Soren navigated by instinct and a handheld GPS, Ravi fighting the controls. "This is madness, Ravi," Doc yelled over the rotor scream. Ravi just nodded, eyes glued to the screen of a tablet duct taped to the console. 11 faint green dots pulsed. They were still alive. He pushed the throttles forward. As they broke through a cloud layer, the ridge came into view. It was a scar of black rock and white snow, lit by the ghostly pre-dawn light. And it was swarming with movement. Taliban fighters, dozens of them, were advancing up the slope toward the shallow cave near the crest. Muzzle flashes sparked from the cave's mouth, a sporadic, dying defense. The SEALs were making their last stand. There was no place to land. Ravi banked the helicopter hard, descending in a screaming, sideways slide that brought them directly over the advancing enemy lines. "Get ready," he roared. From the cave, Senior Chief Walsh saw the old hippo of a helicopter emerge from the blizzard like a phantom. It was not an American Pave Hawk. It was a ghost from an older war, roaring directly over the Taliban position. Without landing, it flared above the cave. Ropes tumbled down. Walsh didn't question the miracle. "Movement! Now! Go, go, go!" His remaining men, 4 of them carrying 2 severely wounded teammates, moved with agonizing slowness. Soren and Doc, harnessed to the ropes, fast roped down to help. The Taliban, shocked by the sudden appearance of the aircraft, regrouped and unleashed a torrent of fire. Rounds pinged against the Mi-8's hull. Ravi held the shuddering bird steady, a sitting duck. Doc and Soren hooked the wounded to rescue straps, signaling for hoist. The SEALs began climbing, their hands bloody on the ropes. One man, covering the retreat, was hit in the leg. Soren dragged him to the rope. Walsh was the last. As he clipped in, he looked up at the cockpit. He saw Ravi, face grim in the green instrument glow, giving him a sharp nod. Then, the world exploded in a hail of gunfire. The helicopter shuddered violently as the cockpit glass spiderwebbed. Ravi cried out, clutching his shoulder, but his hands never left the controls. He hauled the collective, and the overloaded Mi-8 lumbered upward, disappearing back into the concealing storm, leaving the ridge empty and silent behind them. The infirmary at Bagram Airfield was stark and bright. 11 SEALs, wounded but alive, were being treated. Senior Chief Walsh, his arm bandaged, stood before a grim panel of officers. He had just finished his debrief. An intelligence colonel leaned forward. "Senior Chief, this civilian aircraft, you're certain it was not a pre-authorized, covert asset?" Walsh's voice was iron. "No, sir. It was an answer. The man flying it took a round for us. His name is Ravi." He said a friend called him. A sergeant named Carter. The officers exchanged looks. The story was an operational and public relations nightmare. It was also undeniably heroic. Meanwhile, in a stark holding room at Fort Bragg, Michael Carter awaited his fate. The charge sheet listed treasonous insubordination, endangerment of assets, and violation of the Espionage Act. He stared at the wall, wondering if Ravi had gotten through. The door opened. It wasn't the JAG lawyer. It was Major Brennan. He stood for a long moment, then placed a file on the table. "The biometric pings stopped, Carter," he said, his voice devoid of its earlier fury. 2 hours ago, all 11 signals went offline during extraction. Carter's heart sank into his boots. Had it all been for nothing? Brennan's next words were quiet. They went offline at an altitude of 9,000 feet, moving at 120 knots. Then, They reappeared at Bagram. He slid a photograph from the file. It was a grainy, long-lens image of a white Mi-8 helicopter landing on the Bagram tarmac, its side riddled with bullet holes, men in American combat gear being unloaded. 11 men are alive because of a stubborn sergeant and a retired pilot. The media has the story. It's calling it the Christmas Eve miracle. Brennan closed the file. The JAG is dropping the charges. You'll receive a formal reprimand in your file for improper use of a communications channel and a recommendation for the Soldier's Medal for heroism. Don't make me regret this. He turned and left. Carter finally exhaled, the weight of the world lifting from his shoulders. He looked out the small window. It was snowing again. 3 months later, on a bright spring day in San Diego, a simple barbecue was underway in a backyard overlooking the ocean. Michael Carter, now out of the Army, flipped burgers in a t-shirt. Laughing by the grill was Javier Gonzalez, his arms still in a sling, arguing with a fully recovered Senior Chief Walsh about the proper way to season fish. The rest of the SEALs of Echo Team mingled with Carter's and Ravi's families, the sound of easy laughter filling the air. There are no speeches, no medals on display. The real tribute was in the quiet moments, a nod across the room, a firm hand on a shoulder, the unspoken understanding that bound them all. They were not a unit forged by years of training, but a family welded in a single, desperate night by a choice that defied orders and defined duty. The official reports would call it an unauthorized, civilian-assisted personnel recovery. The men in this yard knew the simpler truth. It was a promise made on a silent night, and kept in the roaring heart of a storm. They were here, alive, under the sun, because one soldier had chosen to listen not to the orders on a piece of paper, but to the conviction in his own soul, and in doing so, had turned a story of certain betrayal into a legend of unexpected loyalty. This response is AI-generated, for reference only.